Welcome to Inside Out, the Emotional Awareness Podcast, a Mentalus Academy production. Let's learn more about ourselves, inside and out.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to our podcast called Inside Out. Today, we have Kelly, who's here and who's going to introduce herself and tell us a little bit about the topic she's chosen to talk about today. Hi, Kelly.
Hi, thanks for having me. My name's Kelly. I am 39 years old, not quite 40 yet. I have 2 kids and I work in healthcare and procurement. I've worked in healthcare over the last, I'd say, 20 years. Various administrative roles. Outside of work, I'm passionate about horses and a lot of outdoor physical activities like CrossFit or running for my mental health. I was asked to be on the podcast, very humbled to be here. And when the topics came about, there were a lot of good topics to choose from, but I ended up choosing mindfulness. And given I have 2 young children, a full-time job, and try and take care of myself, that one caught my eye because actually that's one of the ones that I don't know a lot about. I've heard a lot of great benefits from mindfulness, but it's something that I haven't really looked into, and I know that I could probably benefit from it in my very hectic life.
So what are some of the things you'd like to know about in terms of mindfulness? And I'll just jump in and say that you have a really good expert here in all things mindfulness and somatic, because that's Nadzin's field of expertise. So she'll have a lot to say about this topic. So fire away.
So mindfulness, I don't know much about it, just in terms of a general description, right? Because I know a high level what mindfulness could mean, but there's always what's the difference between what mindfulness is versus self-awareness, right? So I guess that'd be my first question, or I guess that's 2 questions. What is mindfulness and what would be the difference between self-awareness and mindfulness?
Yeah, one builds on the other in a way. Mindfulness is being present. It's actually a practice. It's something we can work actively on to be present in what's happening now. To be able to do that, we need self-awareness. We need to be self-aware of what's happening within ourselves or within our external environment. Roughly, I don't know if it's clear for you in that sense.
But closely related is what I'm hearing, right?
They are related. One is more internally, I would say. The other one is out, what's happening in my environment. We can be mindful about our environment and ourselves at the same time.
Yes, that's clear. And how would you go about, you say there's ways to practice mindfulness. How would you go about doing that? Let's say I'm work and so I manage a team of 10 employees and I often get a lot of requests coming at me all the time. Is mindfulness something that you practice in a sense on a daily basis, like meditation, or is it something that in the moment you have a thought process that kind of centers you and brings you back to where you should be?
It's not meditation. Some people get confused with that mindfulness is meditation. It can be. There are some mindfulness meditations, and mindfulness just by itself is actually just being present. So it is a practice. We won't be mindful like that. It's a muscle, I would say. When I explain it to people, it's a muscle. You need to build it. You need to practice that. It doesn't come, well, it might come naturally, but it's you won't be aware of your breath if you haven't practiced where your breath is or how is your breath. So there is some stuff leading up to it. I would say also it's an observation. It's really an observation of what's happening without any judgment. The idea is that it is non-judgmental. So it's, now I'm talking to Kelly and I can see Daniela looking at me. This is mindfulness. I'm just being aware. And my breath is a little bit shallow. So this is how it goes. So you're just observing what's happening in the moment. I also find people expect mindfulness to help them. It is very helpful. I'm just trying to clear out some myth here so that we need to be calm to have mindfulness. Actually, the opposite. It's mindfulness that can help us to have the state because we are in the present. I would also add to that being mindful doesn't necessarily mean we are okay all the time. Being mindful might mean I'm upset now, and being mindful is like I'm annoyed now. So it's just being aware of this is self-awareness. I'm annoyed now. I'm upset now. So this is how it goes. Mindfulness can give us this observation of my inner state of how am I feeling. And with that, we can respond to our environment. If we manage to go back to ourselves, how we want to respond.
Interesting. It reminds me a little bit of, as I'm raising my kids, a lot of the literature that I read is emotion labeling. So to be aware of the emotions that you're feeling within, to be able to work through those emotions. And that's not something that should probably be taught at school, right?
Oh, totally agree with you. For me, psychology, mindfulness, somatic experiencing and somatic censoring, for me, that should be taught really at young age. I don't know what you think, Danielle, also on that.
I think that in fact, I think in the previous decades, what's happened is that kids were always taught to almost dissociate from their emotional state, like their somatic states. The idea of be seen and not heard, for example, which comes from the Victorian era, is all about that, is don't feel what's in your body, just be what you're supposed to be. And I think that's changed, thankfully. And I do think that there's a lot of mindfulness practice that has been added to school curriculums and whatnot to help children better understand and regulate their emotions, but not by repressing them or putting them away, but rather by experiencing them and knowing what it feels like in your body and being able to identify them. Yeah, actually, I think children are probably getting better at that than adults.
A lot of the children, how could you say? A lot of the literature that I read about raising children and stuff, it's about normalizing how to feel the feels and that it's normal to feel angry, normal to feel. Where you're right. Whereas I feel like when I was a kid, it was you need to repress it. Feeling angry or feeling sad was viewed negatively in regard. And I'm thankful for that. I'm thankful to be able to teach my kids that it's okay to express themselves. I do suffer from anxiety. That's something that I've struggled with. It came about when I was a teenager, struggled with mental health issues at that point. And when they diagnosed the anxiety disorder, it answered a lot of questions. So that's why mindfulness to me is very intriguing, because I did a lot of therapy growing up and how to identify the feeling and then work through those overwhelming moments where I felt like there was no control or spiraling in a sense. So it's how can or what are the tips and tricks that you guys would have to suggest to somebody who is very anxious to then self-regulate and bring myself back to where I am? And okay, one of the tactics that I still use to this day was working this, like playing the situation out in my head. So let's say it's a negative situation. You'd say, okay, then what? Then what? And then you came to the end and you realized that, yeah, it wouldn't necessarily be ideal, but life goes on and you're okay. So is that considered mindfulness, or is that just a tactic for anxiety?
I would say that's a tool, mostly. Some of the mindfulness techniques might be just to start naming what's around you, just to be aware of what's happening within your body. Normalizing, of course, like my heart is beating fast, I'm worried about that. Like I see the flower behind you, the yellow one, the red one, pink one. This is one of the tools. Personally, I suggest sensory experiencing. So finding how is your breath? Where is your breath? Where do you feel it? I find putting a hand on the chest or on the belly sometimes is very reassuring, because it brings us back to what's happening here. And it actually takes us away from what's happening in our head.
Okay.
Which is where anxiety is all the time. You've mentioned that you run. I find sometimes that running can be very mindful or can be very dissociative. You can run knowing what you are doing, or you can run and you are zoomed out all the way.
How is mindfulness, if I'm running, how can that be mindful? Yeah.
It's to be present.
Anything can be mindful. Eating could be mindful. Like you sit there and eat a meal and you literally think to yourself, I am taking my fork, I am putting it into whatever food I'm eating. How does it feel to put the fork in the meatball, for example, or whatever? How does it feel when the meatball touches my tongue? What's the texture of it? What does it taste like? Is it salty? Is it not? And with every bite, like, how does that feel? Because our mind can't do two things at the same time. So it can't be mindful, it can't be focusing on that and be anxious at the same time. It's one or the other. So it's just a way to bring yourself back to some form of grounding. So in whatever you're doing. So in your example of running, it's saying to yourself, okay, like, how does my heart feel right now as I'm running? How do my feet feel every time they touch the floor or the ground? What's my breathing like at the moment? If I go faster, does my breathing get faster? It really causes you to focus in the moment. If you've ever had the experience where you're doing something that you're really focused on and you can just lose yourself in it and you lose time, like you don't even realize time has gone by, that's what mindfulness does. It keeps you in the moment so you're no longer focused on anything that could happen in the future. Because that's what anxiety is. It's worry about something that hasn't happened yet. And
Yeah. Okay. That resonated there. Like my garden. So when I'm in my garden, I'm just concentrating on gardening. And then, oops, an hour has gone by and my husband comes and finds me outside. And I'm only thinking about, okay, the tomato needs to be pruned here. Oh, the cucumber needs to climb there. And that makes sense. So am I wrong when I'm like thinking that it's almost like a distraction from the negative what ifs into thinking about what you're doing in that moment?
I would say it's the opposite of a distraction. Like a distraction is something that takes you away from something you're avoiding. It's in the definition of it, but whereas mindfulness is really being into what you're doing. So the distraction would be coming from the outside. This is coming from the inside. Like you're so focused on something that you're totally present, was saying before. It's that presence that makes the difference. So like you're describing in your garden.
Yeah.
It is very hard to stay present to all this because it means that we are also connected to all those feelings, all those, like when you are running, those cramps you might have, it is being connected to all of that. And we are naturally wired to disregard any discomfort. So it is very hard. That's why we avoid to start with being mindful.
Okay. Another question. So you said run. I'm going to keep on with the running example. Actually, I have two questions, but hopefully I won't forget the second one. The first one is running. You say if you're running faster, so my heartbeat gets faster. I feel if I concentrate on my heartbeat getting faster, that would probably get me more anxious because, oh my gosh, my heartbeat's getting faster. Should I slow down because my heartbeat might go too fast? So how would you then direct the thought process in that regard to be able to bring yourself back to a grounded state?
That's a good question. And it's true that if somebody knows that they have a particular sensitivity to something, so if one of your anxieties is health anxiety, for example, where you're worried about health conditions and whatnot, then maybe focusing on your heartbeat is not the right, or your breathing might not be the right way to go. In which case you could focus on, let's say you're running outdoors, you could focus on anything from the color or the shape of the trees or a sound that you're hearing in the distance or anything that brings you to the present moment. So that's part of the self-awareness and knowing yourself and knowing what might trigger you.
I would add to that, you here in that example switched from mindfulness to a thought process. We were talking about how you could feel your heart race, and then you switched to the anxiety mode of, oh, what if my heart beats faster, which is totally anxiety. So it's also being able, and that's totally okay. This is how it goes. And to be able to understand, oh, I switched now to this mode, which is, okay, this is my natural response to this. This is within me. How can I go back? And then like Daniela said, it's, oh, what's surrounding me? Where's my nature? What's happening? But to be able to notice that we switch very fast from what we're feeling to what we're thinking.
Yeah, and
Like
just
that.
follow up on that. There's also, it's hard, like Nedzin said, to stay in mindfulness or in mindful mode, but there is that non-judgmental thing in there too, as we said earlier, that you don't want to now become judgmental of yourself because you've fallen out of a mindful state. And so all you want to do is recognize that, oh, look at that. Like I did just go from being mindful about my breath and now I'm worried about my breath. Okay. And the image I like to use is thoughts are like boxes on a conveyor belt. They're just thoughts. So when you have a thought, you acknowledge it like a box on a conveyor belt and you go, oh yeah, there is that thought that I'm starting to worry about my heartbeat. And you just let it go. Like you watch it go by like it's on a conveyor belt. And then another thought comes in. And you watch that one go by. So you're not consumed by it. You're just watching it and you're bringing yourself back to the present moment. It's a tough thing to learn to do.
Conveyor belt is a good analogy, though. I feel like my conveyor belt is overloaded with boxes because my mind runs so fast. But I like that. And I think I have a bad habit, or one of the things that I had worked on a lot was always thinking the worst, right? When I was a teenager, I used to think, if I think of everything that could possibly happen, then it won't happen. Could you imagine? Like, that's the worst analogy to do and talk about anxiety inducing. So what I ended up learning was I stop myself mid-thought. So I'll often think of like tragedies that could happen, and then I stop. I should not be thinking that. It's of no use. You're just gonna get yourself worked up, or it's just a negative feeling within. So the conveyor belt makes sense to me, where it's okay, I'm gonna put that box back on the conveyor belt and I'm gonna let it go by because it's just a thought and it's not gonna be helpful at all. That's really interesting.
The thing with stopping thoughts is that if you tell yourself, no, I can't be thinking that, I shouldn't be thinking that, the thought becomes even more powerful. The thing with mindfulness is that you acknowledge the thought. You say, yeah, okay, I've just had that thought and it's a thought, and then you let it go. Because if I tell you right now, okay, Kelly, I do not want you to think about a pink elephant. Whatever you don't think of a pink elephant, what are you thinking of?
Pink elephant.
Of course. So that's why the non-judgmental sort of acceptance of the thought, and then just saying, okay, it's a thought. I get it. Okay. And what comes next? Another thought. Okay. That's much, much kinder to yourself.
Yeah. Like that. I'll put it back in the box, close the box, let it go, but acknowledge that I did think about it. And that, I guess, comes in with the non-judgmental aspect of it, that it's okay to have those thoughts, but it's not helpful. So let it move on.
Yeah.
I would
That's
add
reassuring.
that having those thoughts and fighting them is energy consuming, because actually they are our thoughts at the same time. So we are fighting with ourselves against ourselves. That's why it's giving them some fuel to no, but yes, but no, and no. So that's why, in that sense, non-judgmental acceptance might be very helpful. And it's not accepting anything, but yeah, this is my thought and I have it and it's triggering this in me, but I don't need to cling on. Okay. I give an example. I have two doors and it comes from one door with my hat and then it goes out from the other door. So yeah, it does whatever it does. If it resonates the wave it has, but then I don't need to move on to.
So I guess there could be like two different situations, but there's work and then there's at home. So let's say when you're feeling overstimulated. So I'll be in my office and I'll have an employee come in who's having a hard time. And then I'll have another manager from another department standing at my door because they have a question. And then my phone will ring because the VP wants to ask me something about a previous issue. And then I have 283 emails that I have to read. Sometimes like in that moment, it's just like very overwhelming. And I'm wondering if there's a tactic in terms of mindfulness in those moments that could help support. Same thing for at home, where I have two kids. My youngest is actually on the spectrum. So he can be very difficult or passionate at times. And then my other one will be crying because she can't zip up her dress. My husband is running around trying to get lunches, and it's just overstimulation where you have so many things going on at once. And it's hard to avoid the feeling of being overwhelmed and just wanting to crawl under the table or my desk and cry, which I know as an adult is not socially acceptable. Is there something within mindfulness that could support those types of situations?
I think that the first part is just acknowledging that, yeah, it is overwhelming. There's nothing in what you're describing that's pathological, like you're not reacting inappropriately to those situations. There's a lot going on and it can be overwhelming. And yes, like you might feel like crawling under your desk and crying. And that's okay. See, that's the first part, is just to acknowledge that's what you're feeling in that moment. That's what's going on. Now, how to cope with it? It's hard to say in that moment, I'm going to apply a mindfulness technique if you've never applied a mindfulness technique before. The idea is to be able to practice those techniques in times when it's not chaotic, in order to be able to draw on them at least somewhat in those chaotic situations. Let's say you build in some mindfulness, and it doesn't have to be, like you said before, it doesn't have to be an hour of mindfulness meditation. It can just be, I'm doing certain things in my life in a mindful way. So in your example, Kelly, it could be the garden. When you go into the garden, that's your mindful space. But then you start to actually see yourself be mindful when you're working in the garden. You see yourself taking the time to trim the tomato plant exactly as you would want it to be. And, you're not rushing, you're doing it mindfully. And then you start to build in those techniques into other parts of your life, so that, let's take your example at work of everybody trying to have a piece of you. You can actually take a moment in that chaos and just say to yourself, okay, I'm just going to ground myself emotionally right now. This is done with kids all the time. I don't understand why adults don't do it too, because it's very helpful. Is to say, I'm going to pick 3 things in my environment at the moment that are the color blue. And so your eyes, because that focuses on one of the senses, your eyes. So your eyes are going to search the room for 3 things that are blue. You find them, great. Then you're going to tell yourself, what is the furthest thing I hear at the moment? I'm sitting in my office, phone's going off, whatever, but I'm also hearing like a bird somewhere in a tree out there. So focus on that for a couple of minutes and just breathe, and then start incorporating the breathing into it, for example, which can be a technique that'll help you ground that practice into something. So there's all kinds of things that, can be done to ground yourself and take a moment, take a breath.
For me, you just started being mindful just by naming what's happening on your door office. That is mindfulness. And just feeling overwhelmed, as Daniela said, that is being aware of, this is what's happening. It's spinning fast. As she said, if you haven't practiced mindfulness, it might be hard. But I would say, pick one thing. We cannot multitask. And this feeling of multitasking can be overwhelming. So you just name, the phone is ringing, you have someone here, you have the emails. Just pick one and deal with. That kind of brings you also down, because it's like I'm dealing with one thing, and that we have the capacity to do, while dealing with 500 things spinning around my head. That is very hard. So bring your focus to one thing. I don't know if you have the mental space to, what's the most urgent I need to deal with it, or I need this person to move away from my desk so I can deal with it. You pick one, but I find bringing focus back to one thing also helps when we are overstimulated.
One thing at a time.
We can do more.
Yeah. Although we're expected to all the time.
Hey everyone, we hope you are enjoying this podcast. Want to find out more about this topic and much more? Check out our courses at Mentalist Academy. Find out more at www.mentalistacademy.com. And now, back to our podcast.
So let's say I wanted to start practicing mindfulness. Like you say, it would be good for me to practice it when I'm in a regulated state, what would be tactics that you guys would recommend for me to start with?
I always start with the body because this is what I work with. And I know that not everybody is comfortable with, but if you ask me, I would say to start with this because we go with this and we live with that every day, all the time. So for me, I would say you can start it now. Where is my breath? Is my hand cold? I have one hand colder than the other now, just by touching them. So you start developing those kind of practice for me within the body. Where do I feel the tension? Where is there a tension? Do I feel my body? Simple questions. You don't need to start with a whole bunch of 10 minutes. You see, sometimes, yeah, I can feel it here, or I can feel my knot in my stomach. Just to start building awareness with what's happening for me within the body. And then from that, I extend to what's happening in my environment. But for me, this is how it started. Daniela.
Yeah. And then once you've done that, you've done like a body check-in, if you will, then you can start to work on breathing and exercises like breath work, which take you into yourself and allow you to focus on what's going on inside of you as opposed to all the chaos that's going on outside. When you get to the point where mindfulness becomes a habit, if you will, or something that your body and you recognize, then when the storm is going on around you, it'll feel like you're in the eye of the tornado, right? Like it's the calmest place there is. There's a tornado going on around you, but if you're in the actual eye of the tornado, there's no wind. You're just watching the stuff spin around you, but you're calm. That's ultimately where you want to be, but that takes quite a bit of time. And I think the first step is just even recognizing what's going on in your body at any given moment.
And what would you say, like in terms of frequency? So like practicing mindfulness, let's say if we do the body, I'm like acknowledging how I'm feeling, what my hands and all of those things. Is that something that you like, is it once a day? Is it all the time? Is it as often as possible? Like, what would you recommend or what's expected?
There is no expectations. I would say once you have this, it's a practice. It's like when you're starting to learn something, when you start to learn to drive or to ride a bike, first you are aware of everything you need to do, which is mindfulness. And then it just happens. So I say in the beginning is just to how much do you have space for that? Because if you want to practice that and you don't have the mental space for it, and then you're judging yourself for not being able to do that, and that it's counterproductive. I would say to start with daily, that would be great. Twice a day, amazing. You could do that. And then you could go into the habit of
Like twice a day, take a point in my day where I shut my door and I like do a body check-in just to get used to the concept of it. And then as I practice it, then in those overwhelming moments, it might become almost second nature to be able to do that body check-in. Does that make sense?
Yes, totally there. I would say there are steps. Like if you go into your room, close your door and do this body check-in, you've isolated yourself from your environment, which is, there is no stimulus, which is amazing to start with. But I would say then when you are in the kitchen with your kids, so what do I feel now? Just with that, just maybe to be able to acknowledge one sensation within your body. What do I feel now? It was like, I can't hear them, my ears. Just one thing that can be helpful. And then you can take that, you can do that twice a day or maybe more. And then you take it back to work. So you start within yourself and then you can grow it outside. You take it back to whatever.
Kids are quite good at that naturally. This is how they speak unless we train them not to. They're pretty good. If they're feeling anxious, the first thing they'll say is my tummy hurts because they're feeling their anxiety in their tummy. So they're already pretty good at that. It's just a question of getting them to actually verbalize it.
And acknowledge that's what they're feeling. But I guess when like the mom, like I'm not even necessarily, I've been trained in a sense not to acknowledge it. So if I'm not gonna necessarily teach them, then how are they supposed to learn? This is actually eye-opening. This is great. Yeah, because my daughter has anxiety, unfortunately. So that is a sensitive point or a raw spot for me to try and help her through those anxieties so she doesn't have to go through what I went through as an adolescent, and learning that, how to cope with those anxieties and how to redirect the irrational thoughts per se. So if I could instill that mindfulness in her, I feel like it would help her out a lot, especially coming into the adolescent years where there's a lot of judgment and bullying and stuff like that. I guess another question would be like, I guess I'm trying to understand it as a whole, right? Because I'd always seen it as something like meditation where like you have to practice it daily. Or I'm a very step-by-step procedural individual. So it's okay, what's the first step? What's the second step? But if I'm understanding correctly, there's no real steps to it. It's just being aware and like in the moment of what's happening. And that pulls you away from the other thoughts that aren't necessarily helpful in that moment.
It is. There are steps. It is a kind of training to be present, which we don't always have. I personally could never, up till now, and I have a long practice, I could not sit to meditate more than 5 minutes. For me, it was impossible. For me, meditation and mindfulness started with movement. I needed to move in order to help my brain calm down. And then when I'm okay with the movement, my brain just ends up being calm. So see, in that sense, there is not one recipe, but to build up that, we need to practice. We need to start somewhere with, this makes sense for me. And this is how, I can see myself being present. And I highlight the more present, which is very hard. And we don't want to stay that. And we avoid being there all the time. But once we start having those insights, what is presence for me and how does it feel, which is not always fun. I might feel not okay. I think we can start, once we recognize this feeling, this is when we can start building on. I don't know, this is my experience. I don't know about you, Daniel.
And taking it back, I can understand what you're saying, Nadzin, because there are certain instances that take us out of that naturally because of our own way of being, that take us out of a mindful state. So the best places we can learn mindfulness are in those situations that speak to us personally. So you mentioned, Kelly, the horses, that you obviously have a big involvement with horses, as do I. Horses are a great way to learn mindfulness, because if you approach a horse and you're amped up and whatnot, and you're not aware of what's happening in your own body, that horse will get away from you. On the other hand, you have to be very aware of what you're feeling inside when you approach the horse, because that's what's going to make that connection possible, because they're very attuned to our state, even when we aren't. So it's having to learn to become a horse to yourself, to become that mirror back to yourself of what's going on within you. And I use horses, but it could really be any animal. If you approach an animal in a tense state, the animal will react. We learned that with animals. We've certainly learned that with horses, to be able to be mindful of our inner state. But then we don't really transpose it to other parts of our lives, whereas maybe we should.
That would be very helpful, actually. Yeah, like the nonverbal communication is a lot. One of the last interactions I had with a particular horse, he was very worked up. And yes, it makes complete sense, because when I'm always very aware of how I approach a horse, because I know that if I come up, chest up, walking very aggressively, they're going to shy away. So I always try and be like a very open and calm when I go towards the horse. And in that particular situation, I had a lot going on. I was busy. I did not have the time to be with the horse, and the horse was very worked up. And I realized, like, why is he so worked up? I don't understand. He's usually very calm. And I realized that I was very dysregulated. So I actually took deep breaths and rubbed them and told him, I was like, I'm not okay, Rusty. I'm sorry that this is like impacting you. And then I ended up trying to calm myself, and he calmed down somewhat. But why do we do that with animals but not with other people? I guess I don't notice the impact, like, of how I'm feeling, how it would have on other people, or it shows less. I guess horses are more sensitive, or maybe they don't have those, what's the word? Inhibitions.
Their survival depends on being able to read us, right? Or not us, but humans in general or other predators. So they've become quite good at it. Whereas with us, I think that most of our lives is spent trying to mask that about ourselves. You know, you go into a meeting with a lot of important people and your thought is, okay, I'm really anxious, but I can't let that show, right? Because I'm going to look bad or I'm going to seem incompetent or whatever. So we learn to mask and we keep that going. But that means we also end up masking from ourselves. Like, at a certain point, you just stop feeling it. You stop acknowledging what's going on inside of you. Mindfulness reverses that. It tries to get you back in touch with what's going on inside of you, not to harm you, but to be able to work it through. So it's like you can't work on something that you don't know is there. So that's what mindfulness does. So back to your original question, actually, mindfulness helps you become more self-aware.
Ooh, I like that. I like that. So it's normalizing the feelings, right? It's like it's okay to feel the feels. May not be okay to demonstrate crying under a desk at work, but it's okay to feel it and it's okay to be overwhelmed. But knowing that you're overwhelmed then I guess allows you to move on to, okay, I am feeling overwhelmed. This is completely natural because I have a lot going on. And my heart is beating fast and I'm sweating profusely. But let's take one task at a time.
It's a magnificent mindfulness exercise.
Yes, you just summarized it beautifully.
But now I actually have to practice it. That's the tricky part, right? Yeah. Because life does feel overwhelming. And I'm going back to the 3 blue things when I'm in my office and I have someone at my door, someone sitting at my desk, the phone's ringing. And then I take a minute and I go silent and they say, what are you doing? I'm just looking for blue things. I can just imagine how that will go. HR, Kelly, can you come and meet us, please? Be like, no, I'm being mindful.
But that's the beauty of these mindfulness exercises is that you can do them anywhere. If you stop for a second and look around the room, like for all they know, you're looking for a book on your bookshelf. Like, it's okay. Or if it's a sound, like they don't know what you're doing.
Doesn't necessarily help reduce the feeling of being overwhelmed. Or like it doesn't necessarily reduce the level of anxiety, or is it supposed to?
That particular exercise is really just meant to bring you back into a state of present moment, like giving you something to focus in the here and now. Because when your phone is ringing and somebody's talking to you at the same time, etc., you're no longer thinking about now. You're now thinking about the future. You're thinking about what happens if I don't answer that email right away. This person needs something. How am I going to do that and do the other things I have to do? See, that's all like a tomorrow problem, a 10 minutes from now problem, an hour from now problem. It's not right now. You know, the example I like to give is that we really only have right now. Like I'm sitting here talking to you right now. This is the time I have. An asteroid could come crashing through my window and wipe me out in the next 5 seconds. I don't think about that because it's not likely. But the reality is all I have is right now. So this is what this does, is it brings you back to right now. I am looking for 3 blue things around this room. That's now. So it's a means to regulate you back into the present moment. And it doesn't last. 2 minutes later, you're probably still thinking about everything else that's going on, and that's okay. But it's an exercise, like working on a muscle, like Nedzin said.
The bigger the muscle gets. So what are other tactics then? So, or ways of doing it, like aside from the body? Let's say my muscle gets really good at acknowledging and bringing me back in the now and how I'm feeling. What would be the next step?
It can be, as Daniela said, mindfulness can be with anything. So you can bring it back to everything you are doing. How am I eating? What is it that I'm eating? How does it taste? Is it hot, cold, warm? You see, those also, for me, those also are sensations. All my focus is on sensations more because this is how my train of thought mostly. How do I feel? After my run, am I feeling okay or not? You just need to build this. So it grows back to out and everything. And then when it happens that you have 10 people at your door and messages and everything, you have this capacity to do all this thinking process that you did magnificently a while ago. A phone is ringing, he's here in that presence, but it's okay, what can I do? And the connections in the brain has this capacity to generalize those learning experiences we have. So it goes inside faster, and then you don't need to stop every time and do this process. So it goes, oh yeah, this is what's happening. Tack, 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 tack. What do I need to do now?
It also takes your nervous system and takes it out of panic mode. So in the short time that you're doing that, your nervous system is no longer in this hyperactivated mode. It's okay, I'm going to go back to horses. I apologize, but it's like a horse can't be panicking and eating grass calmly at the same time. So it's a way to get the nervous system back to, I'm eating grass now, I'm okay. Even if it's momentarily, it's fine. You've gotten there, but it gives your mind enough time to then be able to actually solve the problem that's causing you an issue in the first place without that hyper panic mode.
I say, you see, you've mentioned horses and survival. I find that we humans are also on survival mode most of the time, and we're not aware of that. So for me, being hyperstimulated is also a survival mode. So yeah, in what Daniela said, being able to acknowledge what's happening, go back to our regulated system is also getting out of survival mode and being able to take a decision clearly.
And so you start the process of mindfulness by being intentional about it and by taking the time to do it. And then the more you do it and the more intentional you are, it then at a certain point becomes innate, where your muscle is developed and it just happens naturally.
And that being said, even with all our efforts, being on survival mode, sometimes when the threat is big outside, we may not be able to do it. That being said, it's not like an wait all the time. But having this practice might us bring ourselves back faster.
Makes sense. I also really appreciated when you mentioned that meditation wasn't for you. That's something that I've never been able to do, that and yoga. I know how beneficial it can be and I know how good it is for certain people, but because I'm so anxious, I have a hard time stopping my mind, and I end up getting more anxious when I meditate or try to meditate or do yoga. I was in university. I said, I'll do yoga. It'll be great for me. I'm in the middle of a yoga class and all I can think of was how I was wasting time instead of studying. And I left and I was more anxious than when I was. So for you to be saying that meditation isn't for you and movement is better, and that was a big takeaway for me, because movement helps me way more than sitting and trying to concentrate on my body or my breathing. So I think that's something I'll remember. That in my conveyor belt thoughts.
Exactly.
So have we managed to answer most of your questions today, Kelly?
Yeah, you guys have been patient. I asked a lot. It's way more clear, and I'm actually excited to give it a try and also be aware of like how much I already do it, but you don't know what you don't know. So I think it'll be like gratifying where it's okay, like I can do this. And I also like the fact that it's not like a physiotherapy request where you have to do certain stretches 4 times a day for an hour. It's doing it on the fly, but just being intentional about it at first. I think that's really helpful. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the questions.
Yes, and that was a really good discussion. Thanks again.
Yes, and I look forward to hearing your other sessions. I can't wait.
See you next time. Find out more at www.mentalizeacademy.com.